Maple fusion, sounds of our history. How has music helped shape the past of Lethbridge's streets? Quirky and bold, with a weekend and glen. Pull up the chair, let the tale begin.
Hi, I'm Shelley Kay with Maple Fusion, Sounds of Our History. Let me ask you something. What does it mean to be welcomed, not just as a visitor, but as a special guest, invited into peace by those who once had none, greeted with grace by those whose past is marked with pain, by injustice, by silence, and yet those who chose to offer harmony in return? Here in Lethbridge, in the quiet beauty of the Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden, every stone path, every gentle breeze, every chime of the bell tells a deeper story. It's not just about design or tradition, it's about resilience. This garden was created by a community once displaced, rejected, denied even the right to live in Lethbridge, unwelcome, unseen, invisible. And yet they stayed, they built, they overcame. Instead of bitterness, they planted peace. They created a place not only of reflection, but of welcome, where they invited us in as guests that are honored, where history is remembered, and where the values of harmony, respect, and gratitude still echo and grow. In this episode, we're going to be talking with two stewards of the garden's legacy as we journey through what this garden and the legacy of Japanese Canadian really means, not just in the beauty, but in the strength that it took to making it. The visit is not just to admire the beauty and feel the peace, but it's to listen and learn. We'll ask the deeper questions. How did peace come from pain? What does music and sound mean in this space? And what is the significance of silence? Footsteps on the gravel. Where did the gravel come from and the rocks? How is the tea poured? Intentionally? What does it mean when a bell rings here? You will hear from my guests who remind us that this garden is not just a tourist stop. It's a living monument to the values of respect, resilience, kindness, harmony, and reconciliation. And as you listen, I want you to please consider this. As you walk through a garden like this, what do you see? What do you hear? Do you hear the stories that this is telling us? And finally, do you wonder where the flowers are? I'm Shelley Kay, and this is Maple Fusion, Sounds of Our History podcast. I'm delighted to present to you drums of memory, soundscapes of the garden, as I'm joined today from Nikka Yuko Japanese Gardens in Lethbridge, Alberta with...
Hi, my name is Janet Adachi Elkyar, and I'm from Lethbridge, and I'm a current board member with the Lethbridge and District Japanese Garden Society, as well as a volunteer at the Bunka Center and with the Nikkei Memory Capture Project.
Awesome. And my name is Eric Granson. I'm the marketing and sales manager with Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden, and I'm born and raised in Southern Alberta. So, and there's a huge tie-in with my love of our history and our garden.
Maple Mixers. Before we dive deep, let's have a little fun. Do some Maple Mixers and get to know each other. And so we are going to play our first game.
Great.
Janet, you are, I think, the tone of B. Eric, you are F, and I'm D.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Do you want to check your bell? And
Oh, there you go.
Oh, look at that. I think yours sounds really clear.
It does.
I think bells is going to play a big part in our discussions here
so.
today.
Yes, that's
so
awesome.
in our game, we've got, first of all, a real easy one to ease you into this. It's called This or That.
Okay, I'll just pull this one. And it says, tea ceremony or calligraphy session?
Calligraphy session. I love to be able to read notes.
Awesome. Okay, so Eric, and I'll answer this one. How's
Okay,
that sound?
sounds good to me. All right. Bamboo rustling or bird song?
Oh, bird song, I have to say.
Awesome.
Okay.
So I'll read this one here for you, Shelley. Drive through the desert with no air conditioning and all the windows rolled up, or drive a convertible top down through a heavy snowstorm.
Oh, well, I'd have to go snowstorm because you can put scarves and take
I was
Frosty
gonna
the
say.
Snowman with you.
Yeah, it's also another reason why I always say I'd rather be cold than hot, because it's cold I can always add more layers, and the hot I can only take so many off before I get arrested. So that's true, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with
Okay.
you.
Okay. All right. So our last one here is for you, Janet.
Okay.
And your best friend turns out to be a spy for a hostile foreign power, or your best friend turns out to be a bank robber in hiding.
Oh my gosh, a bank robber in hiding.
Ah, there we
Get the money
go.
out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And only you know where he is.
Yeah, that's right.
Wonderful. Well, those are our icebreakers for today and
Cool.
having some
That
fun.
was
We've got
good.
to know each other a little bit better and hopefully had a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Yes,
for
that was
sure.
fun.
Oh, listen, let's do it together.
Okay.
Woo! Now we're going to go between the lines where the music, the memories, and the meaning of the story unfolds. It's nice to have both of you here. Welcome. And you're welcome. How did you both get involved with the gardens, Eric?
Yeah, so I started with the Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden in 2022, but my journey starts a little bit earlier than that. I actually visited there with my family, and being locally from the area, I wanted to we went for the winter lights, and I never really appreciated the real value of the garden until I really got immersed into when I started my career there. And so when I first started there in 2022, I really wanted to make a difference in the community. And I knew that the Japanese garden was just such a huge piece of the community. And I really wanted to have a stamp, something I could be proud of, to be part of something so incredible. And now that I've had this opportunity, seeing where I can grow the garden in a different sense and a different way is something meaningful to me and something I've always wanted to do in my life.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. And so, Janet, you've got quite a history, and I would be most interested in hearing how you became involved and what your background to that is.
Oh, thank you so much, Shelley. And thank you for inviting Eric and myself here. I really appreciate that. Well, I've always loved the beauty and simplicity of the Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden. And when the Bunka Center opened in 2022, I noticed when I was entering the Japanese diaspora and the history timeline map. And I realized that I had a story to tell with my family's history during the 1942 Japanese-Canadian evacuation. And the Nikkei Memory Capture Project was just starting to interview people of Japanese ancestry to do a digital story. So I thought to myself, this is what I've been waiting for. So this was the platform that I needed to tell my family story. So I created the digital story, Family Recipe. This digital story honors my mother, Kikuko. My husband, Peter, and I, we narrate our lives as an interracial couple, and we celebrate our Japanese and Danish heritage with our 2 children. We have always told our children they were warriors and to accept any challenge that came their way, as they are half samurai and half Viking. So after I retired in 2023, it was an honor for me to be able to volunteer at the Bunka Center and the Nikkei Memory Capture Project, where I tell my family's history, and I find it to be so healing and rewarding. So thank you, Shelley, for inviting me here.
Well, thank you. And you've got quite a story to tell. I know you had mentioned when we spoke earlier that your grandfather came to Canada, was it in 1906?
Yes, my maternal grandfather, Takeichi Kabuchi, he and his parents arrived in 1906 from Tottori, Japan. And they were one of the first people of Japanese ancestry to actually purchase 40 acres of fertile land in Mission City, BC. So they grew strawberries and rhubarb there. They were very successful. My grandfather, though, at the time he was a young man, so he was looking for a bride. He enlisted the help of a matchmaker. the matchmaker introduced him to my grandmother, Itoi. She came on the ship. She was one of the first picture brides, in fact. So she came at the young age of 16, not knowing anyone, from Japan, and she met my grandfather there in BC, and they were married in 1914. So they did build a big house, and that on the 40 acres, and they had 7 children. So that was the history.
That's the history of the family coming over.
Yes.
And then 1942. Could we jump forward to 1942?
Yes.
And if you're all right to share about some of those experiences.
So my paternal grandfather, he also came in. He was in 1906. He came. They lived off the land. Everything was going well until, unfortunately, 1942, everything was lost for many families, including my family. So it was a very traumatic, very, very, very tough time.
In 1942, they were forced out of their homes, sent to remote beet farms. Can you take us back and share what your family recollections are of that time?
Yes, unfortunately, when World War II occurred, my parents, my grandparents, they were one of the 22,000 people that were they were in British Columbia, so they were ordered from the government to move 100 miles off of the West Coast. So my parents and grandparents, they unfortunately had to bury all their precious belongings in their backyard, and they were only allowed 1 or 2 suitcases. They had to be of a specific weight, so it was very limited. And my mother's family, they boarded the train. They didn't know where they were going. It was a very, very traumatic time, full of uncertainty, people just so worried about their future. And so then they boarded the train, and then they came to a small town, Picture Butte, and they were met by farmers. The farmers needed laborers. So of course they saw my mother's family, who had 9 people in it, 7 children, 2 adults. They thought, well, this will be a good crew. So my mother said they left their big, beautiful 40-acre property, the big, beautiful house. They were directed to a beach shack, and my mother just couldn't believe it. She was just speechless. She couldn't believe that they went from that to this beach shack. 9 of them crammed in there. It was unbelievable, unbelievable.
What time of year was it that they...
It was in March.
In March.
1942. So there was frost. My mother said there was hoarfrost all inside the walls. There was no insulation. There was no way that they could travel. They had to walk to the nearest store. And if farmers were kind enough, they may take them to the store. But she said most of the time they either biked or they walked. That was the way it was, yeah.
And again, when we were talking earlier, and I was just so taken by your story. And you said a comment, and again, if you could give me Japanese 101 again on this, but there was a phrase, "It can't be helped," because I wondered how you could be so graceful to accept that, how without anger, outward anger. What is "it can't be helped"? Could you speak to that a bit, please?
The Japanese people at that time, like in 1942, there were so many barriers, and there was just so much racial discrimination. I'll give you an example. My father would often talk about his experience when he came to Alberta. They ended up, his family, they were in the Tabor area. And so then it was a hot summer day. He wanted to ride his bike from Tabor to Lethbridge. So he did that, and then he arrived in Lethbridge, and he thought, well, I'm so thirsty, I need to have a bottle of pop. So he went to the store, and of course the store owner acknowledged everyone else. He walked back and forth and served everyone else except for my father, who was invisible. And so my father had to leave the store, tired, thirsty, and defeated. So it was experiences like that, how the Japanese community would always say "shigatakanai," which means it can't be helped. It can't be helped, and they always said that because they didn't know how else to cope. It seemed so hopeless, and the government was the authoritative figure, and they knew they had to obey the government's orders because they wanted to prove to people that they were law-abiding and reputable citizens. So shigatakanai was the only way that they could survive.
Let's be clear about this. This part of history had Japanese Canadians losing their land, their homes. It was taken. They were relocated away from everything they had and knew. They were sent to live in beach shacks, which were wooden boxes with no insulation, cracks in the walls, and hoarfrost on the walls. A burning stove, forced to work brutal hours in the sugar beet fields. They had no time for enjoyment and certainly not music appreciation. I would imagine the sounds of those years would be dire. The sounds would include perhaps teeth chattering from the cold, the crunch of boots on the frost out in the mud-frozen fields, wind slicing through the cracks of a shack, chopping wood, wool blankets being shaken, metal hose hitting dry earth, beet tops being snapped, trimmed, grunting from lifting sacks of beets dragged along by the rows, and rustling of the burlap sacks that were used for bedding. And yet, even after the war, after all the hard work they were subjected to at that time, they were still excluded. They were not allowed to live in the city of Lethbridge until 1960. Now, that's not ancient history. That's within a single lifetime. That's in our backyard. Janet, are there sounds that remind you of your childhood?
Well, yes, there are some sounds. I remember a lot of family gatherings with cousins and aunts and uncles. And so the sounds that I remember are happy times because the Japanese Canadian people are very happy and positive people. So the sounds that I remember the most are of all these homemade Japanese dishes and just the sprinkling of laughter and among the chatter of the people. Those are the sounds that I fondly think of and are very precious to me.
And so would those family gatherings include making of food and making sushi?
Yes, yeah. And it was like I said, another fond memory is just the washing of the rice. You hear the sounds of the rice hitting the pot and then the water being added, and it's rinsed many times, and then the water's poured off, the water's added, and then you can hear the rice being cooked and the fragrance. That to me is one of my most fond memories as well. Yeah, and making sushi, it's kind of like a team effort. You have, the nori's out, and then they put the rice on top, and then we have the goodies in the middle, and then we roll them with like a bamboo mat, and there's a lot of laughter, and it's just great family memories.
So if somebody couldn't see your story, what sound, is there a sound? And if so, what would that sound be that you would want them to hear and then understand about yourself or the Japanese Canadian culture?
I think the sound of my family's history would be the wind, because the wind depicted a lot of whether they were going to have dust and dirt flying in their faces as they were hoeing the sugar beets, topping the sugar beets. The wind, to me, was the uncertainty. You know how the wind can swirl around in circles. And I know when my parents came, they said the prairies was something so different. It was so flat, and it was just, they had never seen any area that had been so flat and dusty. And so then that is what I picture. just that swirling wind, not knowing which direction they're going to take.
In many ways, that is metaphorical to the uncertainty of 1942 as well, isn't it?
Yes, and also how the wind can change. And it did change for the better.
And so are there any sounds or memories, probably not the wind, but are there things that are fading or getting forgotten within, I guess I would ask that in a twofold of the history, both within your family or the gardens, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But is there anything specifically you can think of that are sounds or instances like the wind that seems to be fading that you want to hold on to and let people know?
The only thing that ever comes to mind to me is sometimes we forget our manners. We forget our manners. And I know that as Japanese Canadians, we were always taught we have to be so respectful of the elderly people. We have to, and that corresponds to Indigenous culture as well. And I noticed that in today's world, we're in such a rush and we don't take the time to appreciate things a lot. And that's one thing I'm finding historically is just to step back and just to take that time and have that respect for the moment.
I would actually say just to build on that, actually, just based on this new generation of people coming in, is part of the things with technology being so easily accessible for new people coming in and out. The instant gratification is so much easier with young people now than it was when we were younger. So that's why even just having that sort of time to get them to slow down, because it's not about just getting in and out as fast as possible, moving on to the next thing as fast as possible. It's taking that time to reflect. It's to learn and listen and figuring out how we can keep on going in that sort of sense and take the time for ourselves. And that garden sort of forces you to do that.
That's right.
Wonderful.
It's very healing and meditative.
Yes.
And that's what we need.
More of. We do.
Exactly.
We do.
We do need
And
that.
I think that takes us to our next section too, is resilience. So from the injustices to reclamation and building the gardens, but including too, Janet, your specific history, like so many others, has led to the garden, which is both painful and powerful. But into the light, how did the Japanese garden come into being?
Yeah, so it started out in, the talk started in about the early 1960s, because around 63, I believe, they wanted to make sure that they knew that Lethbridge had a very large Japanese Canadian population, particularly in the Niseis. So they wanted to make sure that they had a place for people to come in and really have a center for them or a garden somewhere for them to have some sort of representation, but also a little bit of the history that's built into it too. Janet touched on a little bit of the hardships of it. So it's a little bit of learning from that history, and then also as a representation of the people that live in the community as well. So with the mayor, Cleo Mowers, which was the Lethbridge Herald editor at the time, everyone just wanted to make sure that it's bring a garden to represent a lot of the individual Canadians that were living in locally there as well.
The garden opened in 1967.
Yes, correct.
And if we look at calculate the years up to 1967, it's not many years till after the hardships. That's a short period of time relatively to put together such a magnificent piece.
I think that that's where it showcases that some people your leaders need to be progressive in a sense, because I think that even though the people in Southern Alberta were not ready to accept people of Japanese heritage or culture or anything like that, but the actual the leaders, the Cleo Mowers, the Lethbridge Herald editors, the mayor of Lethbridge, other people in government were starting to realize that that was not okay. That's not right. So the governments were actually more progressive than the people living here, and as a result, people are less inclined to change their patterns and their ways. It's very similar to the way it is now, being in the area that we do live in, and so that part of that is also contributing to it as well. So adding the garden there, that's a start. Adding new laws in there, reparations, those are all starts, because people will follow that eventually. But the conversation and the ball has to get rolling somewhere or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the garden's open.
Yes.
Can you share a bit about what that was like?
Obviously, most of my thing is seen the actual video of it. So we actually have a video of the opening of the garden. So we can actually look and see the original kind of Minyo dancers have been there since the start of the garden. So like you see the Minyo dancers dancing in the garden as well. But what's cool is that the garden's summer season in 1967, I believe, is still the highest in recording. And so that goes to show that the garden was a success from its start. People were worried that, it was going to be part of, following similar histories, and people weren't going to be accepting of it. But the attendance itself shows the exact opposite. It shows that, they are resilient. They also are very forgiving. Despite the most horrible, horrific things that you can imagine, it's still also, there is a little bit of light in the most darkest of dark.
So I have to ask, the bell.
Well, the bell is they call it a bongshu style bell, which means that the bell is struck from the outside with a striker. And so then there's 108 knobs on that bell. And according to Buddhist thought, 108 knobs equals 108 worries. So that's why at New Year's Eve, we have people that just flock around. That is one of, I think, our busiest times, you would say, Eric. And so everyone wants to take a turn, and they want to strike that bell at least 108 times to cast out those worries and troubles, and so that we can start the new year fresh. And so then that activity is the Joya no Kana, and it is an awesome event.
Yeah, and that's what's wonderful about the garden itself too, is to add the different programming and the culture into our garden as well. So now the garden was a symbol of what it represented post-World War II and the people that live here and all the things like that. But then you start adding the programming in there and the cultural sensitivities and all those types of things that goes along with the dancing, the drumming, the bells, the tours, all that kind of stuff. I think that's why we have such a huge increase in attendance as the years have come along.
Sugar and facts. And now it's time for a little sugar and facts trivia treat to keep your brain dancing. Here's the twist for this episode. The entire Nikka Yuko garden was designed by a Japanese landscape artist, but built entirely by Canadian hands, using all Canadian materials. And that included the rocks, directly from the Lethbridge coulees, the pine trees, and even the wood in the buildings, all from southern Alberta. So while the gardens look authentically and are Japanese, it's a true Canadian creation, representing harmony between two cultures. The garden is whatever you need it to be. Could you expound on that just a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So the garden itself is, we mentioned about the history, the tough parts of that. There's going to be people in there that want to know that history. They want to learn that history. There's going to be people in there that want to just go in there and watch an anime movie. There might just be someone in there that wants to go for a tour, somebody who wants to see a tea demonstration because they've never seen what that's like before. Somebody might just want to learn the Japanese language before they go off to Japan. There's different things. The garden is there for whatever you need it to be. If you're looking to have those peace and tranquility hours there, we have a day for that. If you want to have an amazing kind of a festival time with the traditional Japanese festivals, Zaki Matsuri, we have that too. If you want to learn how to do taiko drumming, we have those displayed. Learn how to dance, special dancing, we have those too. There's anything in the garden that you want it to be, or anything you're searching for in life, the garden could be a place for you for that. And that's what's nice about that, and what's wonderful about the garden, that I don't think it really gets that much attention, because the number one thing I hear from different people is, I wish the garden was more like this, or I love the garden, the fact that the garden is like this. And so for me, that shows me that everybody has a different perception of what they perceive its intentions to be. Maybe you hear a story from one of our volunteers that changes your perception about how you perceive things. Now you're learning something new. Then that's, to me, is something that the garden will teach you something, even if you don't necessarily ask it to.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
If we can look back to the garden, can I ask both of you, do you have a sound for individually that you feel is a sound that is really, you take away that in your heart of, this is what the garden, that's that sound, like whether it's the waterfall or the tea, the bell.
Yeah.
The bell for me, and also the taiko drumming.
Yeah.
Because to me, the taiko drum drumming is a big surprise to the visitors and the guests because they expect quiet, healing, tranquility, meditative environment. And then all of a sudden, when we have the taiko drumming going, the guests are looking, oh my, you know. But the whole thing is with the taiko drumming, to me, it represents the spirit of the community. And when I hear that drumming, that is what I envision, the excitement, the energy, and the spirit of us all coming together in this beautiful garden area. That is what that sound is.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So what is your sound for the garden?
Mine's two, because I went to the garden. I was born and raised in Coldell, so obviously in Lethbridge area, but I actually haven't been to the garden since 2017 was the first time I ever went. So I've been here for decades and didn't bother to take it in, and part of that was probably one of my regrets in that sense. But my first introduction to the garden was during the Winterlight Festival. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the first sound that I think about during the Winterlight Festival is very much about the sound of kids laughing and running and really saying ooh and ahs to the lights. And because being a family man myself, I see my kids in those kids too. And so then that's a lot of positive memories for me, seeing them happy there. Now that working there though, I think that really understanding it and taking it in for what it really is, it's the waterfall for me. It's the sound of walking in there, you know, when I walk around to take pictures and the garden is closed, but I just hear the waterfall going and there's no one else in there but me and maybe a couple of city staff. But I'm able to take that in, but that's for me. And what's nice about that is those memories are for me. And while I may have one side of memories for my kids, and I think about my kids in that one, but the other one is my own reflection for me. It's taking the time for me that sometimes we forget to do once in a while.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned, Janet, that you have an excerpt from your mother.
My mother had a journal, and I'd just like to quickly read what she experienced in 1942. So it's a quote. In May 1942, we were evacuated to Alberta because of World War II. I was 19 years old at the time. We had a very difficult time adjusting to the hard work and climate and trying to cook with coal, and also to heat the sugar beet shack, which didn't have any insulation in the walls, so it was very, very cold. It is hard to believe that 9 of us are crammed in this tiny shack. I think that we ate more than we made during doing sugar beets, as it was such a struggle. In March 1945, my father passed away from a burst appendix at the Lethbridge Hospital at the age of 51 years, which was a great shock to us all. He left behind my 5-year-old sister and my 5 brothers, and now it will be very hard to make ends meet. In 1945 and 1946, I took a dressmaking course in Shaughnessy. My friend and I walked or took the Greyhound bus. I got my diploma and thought at the time it really wasn't what I wanted to do. But after I got married, it came in handy as I sewed dresses for the girls and made shirts for the boys when they were small. I remember sewing a dress for my little sister, and she was so happy with that dress that it all made it worthwhile. She liked it so much, she didn't want to take it off. End quote.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. It's unimaginable that those times occurred.
Well, thank you.
And it's, I thank you both so much for sharing the story of the garden, the resilience, the background, and how that resilience brought forth such a wonderful thing that we have here in Lethbridge. Bringing it in. Let's switch gears and see what our guest brought in to share about their part of history. What have you brought for us to share in another story?
Well, we have the actual traditional tea bowl, the chawan, and we have the whisk here. And what happens in an official tea ceremony is that we would have matcha tea powder scooped in here. Once the bowl has been heated with the boiling water and rinsed, then we put the matcha tea powder in here, and then we would just whisk it until it has a foam. Then I would hand it, if I'm the host, I would hand it to Eric, and Eric would take it, and he would actually turn it 90 degrees. He would turn it clockwise, and he would drink from the part that is not decorative, And then I would be able to admire the beautiful bowl. And so that is part of the traditional tea ceremony.
Wonderful. May I hold the bowl?
Yes, you certainly can.
So if we can just show everyone, starting, so this, Janet, this is the portion
That I would drink from.
you would drink from.
Yes,
And then this is the decorative portion.
that's exactly right. So then I could admire the beautiful painting on the chawan tea bowl, and you would be drinking the tea, and you would drink it all up because that's part of being very courteous. So then if I placed a sweet in front of you, you would eat the sweet as well. You would eat it all up because you want to be very polite and respectful.
And is this called a tea bowl or a teacup?
This is a tea bowl. This is a chawan tea bowl.
Chawan.
Yes.
And is this your pattern, your family pattern? Is it just a story?
What happened with this is that I was given this because the school that I was at, we actually participated in a Japanese exchange. So that was with Hokkaido. And so then Hokkaido, as a gift, they gave it to me. So this is a treasure, really, from them. So it is something that I've always appreciated, and I think fondly of the memories that I have with this bowl.
I think gift giving is a huge part of Japanese
Yes.
culture as well, too.
Yes.
So part of that is also that as well. And part of that about giving each people their own kind of courteousness and that kind of thing. I think it boils down to omotenashi, doesn't it?
Yes.
About being a proper good hospitality. So omotenashi means showing hospitality and being a good host. And so that's one thing we try and teach our staff to give to everyone else, is showcase that omotenashi. So it's showing that as well as is showcasing that omotenashi for each individual person, that courtesy and that sort of highlight for each person. Right now, what's really cool is we do a no date, which is an outdoor tea, every single day now. So before we just did it on Tea Thursdays. So we get a lot of people on Thursdays just to do tea, but then people would show up on Saturday or Sunday and be like, I'm busy from out of town, let's do tea. So one of the nice things about our tea demonstrations is it's all done either inside the pavilion or outside, and it keeps that authenticity that way, but it's every single day now. So we're bringing back to more of that cultural element, and that's all part of our program engagement manager, who is from Kobe in Japan.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Again, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for bringing. These look like very treasured items, so thank you very kindly for bringing this. So Janet and Eric, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't touched on or asked today?
I would say the only thing for us is to, for upcoming events and things like that, definitely check us out on social media at Nikka Yuko, and also nikkayuko.com for tickets and events on our website as well.
And I'd just like to thank you so
Yes.
much, Shelley, for having us participate in this wonderful podcast. And please come and visit the beautiful, breathtaking Japanese garden, the Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden.
The honor is mine. My gosh, I thank you both so much for being a part of this podcast series. I'm Shelley Kay with Maple Fusion, Sounds of Our History, and I'm here today with
Eric, and with Nikka Yuko Japanese Garden.
And Janet.
Rainbow fusion, sounds of our history. How does music help shape the past of Lethbridge's streets? Quirky and bold, with a weekend agree.